Well, welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're going to find the next hour helpful and that you'll find its time well spent. We've got 45 minutes during which I'm going to try and scratch the surface of this very big subject. We're going to allow 15 minutes for questions afterwards. There is a lot to cover and we're going to have to keep the pace up, so bear with me. There will be questions at the end, but there is a Q&A box, as Ben has mentioned, and if there are things that you want to ask as we go along, type them into the Q&A box. There is a box that says you can keep your question anonymous, so if your boss is on this same webinar and you don't want him or her to know who you are, use that box. Your question will come up, I will see it. I may tackle it as we go along, but I may leave it to the end just to keep the flow going so we can get through everything in 45 minutes, leaving us time at the end for the rest of those questions. There will be some notes available, and I'm not going to read all of this out, you'll be relieved to hear. So you can download the notes from the IOSH Consultancy Group microsite, possibly later this afternoon, but definitely tomorrow. So you can get those. Do jot your own notes down as we go along. I say I'm not going to read out all the slides. If there are people who can't actually see the slides, then there may be, you talk to Ben about that in the Q&A box, the chat box, and he can sort out any AV issues. So let's get started. The structure of this session, just so you see where we're going with it, is to help you really think about whether this is the right thing for you, setting up your own business. And if so, what kind of structure you should be looking at, how you should be thinking about your work areas, and how to really get your business off the ground and make it thrive. As I mentioned, this is a very, very big subject, and all we can really do today is just get you thinking about it. But I hope these headings will be helpful, and I'm going to share my experience. As Ben says, I've done this for 25 years, and hopefully some of what I tell you, you can take it and make it your own. Let's have a look at the areas we're going to look at. I'm splitting this into 5 sections just to help you understand the structure of it. Firstly, we're going to look at some introductions, who I am, and more importantly, who you are and where you are in your decision process as to whether to set up on your own. We're then going to move on to what your objectives might be for running your own business and to help you think about whether this is the right thing and what you're trying to achieve. We're then going to move on to what your business would provide, what kind of services and how you're going to structure that. We're then going to look at the logistics as to how you would actually set your business up in terms of things you need to organize. We're going to finish with a shortish section at the end about achieving your goals. And this is really just some distilled points of experience over the years that I've picked up from lots of other people as to how to do this best. So 5 sections. Let's get started with section 1. Ben mentioned I've been doing this for 25 years, and I came into it from the property angle. So I studied land management at university, joined a firm of chartered surveyors, and then moved into health and safety almost by accident and decided 10.5 years ago to set up my own business. So for me, I've been a consultant really for all of my career, but actually I've been a health and safety consultant for probably about half of that time. And this is really about the consultancy skills that we're looking at in how you set up your own business. The health and safety side of things, you will know that for yourself and you will have your own area of working. So that's the angle that I'm coming at it from. Let's now just think about you and a quick introduction to you. In a moment, Ben's going to run a short poll, and I want you to just think about which of these 4 categories you fall into, because this will help me to understand where most of you as the delegates in this webinar are in your own practice journey, and help me to kind of focus where I put the comments as we go on. So Ben, if I hand back to you, perhaps you can run that poll.
Yep, not a problem. That's now been launched, so everyone, all the delegates will now see that, and I can see that all the answers are starting to flood in. So we'll give sort of 10-20 seconds for everyone to put their responses through, and then I can share the results.
And just while that's happening, this is a set of different stages really in your journey as a consultant, and it's just to kind of give us a bit of an idea as to where you are on that process, if indeed you haven't started it at all.
Okay, we just got a few more to come in, so we'll just we'll allow a few more seconds, and then I'll end the polls. Okay, I think that's everything. So I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. Okay, so hopefully you should be able to see that, James.
Yep. So here we are. More than half of you then work in health and safety, but not as a consultant, and around about a third are already working in your own consultancy practice, which is really you and a family member, but no third-party staff. And a smaller percentage, 16%, are working as a consultant for someone else's business. So really most of you are at the start of that process in terms of setting up your own consultancy practice. That's helpful, and let's explore that now a bit further as we carry on. Okay, next then, let's move on to our second section here, which is what your objectives are for running your own consultancy practice. And you may have heard this expression many times, perhaps as a cliche or a joke. So you go for a job interview and you're asked the question, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? Or, depending on your age, where do you see yourself in 30 years' time? And it's often sort of thrown away as a fairly glib question, but actually it is a really, really important question, and you need to know the answer to it, because otherwise you're in danger of drifting along in your career and reaching retirement age thinking, actually, I didn't really want to be doing this. So you need to be fast forwarding through to when you're thinking of retiring, what kind of work would you like to be doing? How would you like to be positioned in your career? Because unless you have that as your goal, you're not going to be able to set the blocks in place on the path towards reaching that goal. So think that one through. What kind of work do you want to do? Do you want to be working for yourself, for somebody else? Do you want to set up your own company with employees where you can gradually wind your time down to 2 or 3 days a week? What are you aiming for? Think that through, write it down, brainstorm it, make some notes. There are two key areas that are going to influence that decision, and either of these may be more important than the other to you. The first one is money. And as British people, we don't really like talking about money. It's a slightly uncomfortable subject, but you have to do it because you need money to live on, and your family needs money to live on. So the question is, how much money do you need, which is different to how much money do you want. You need to sit down and do a budget and work out what income do you need to be able to do the things you need to do in your life. Work out a personal budget. Make sure you've got some sort of buffer, because if something needs fixing on your house, or if you're out of work for a period of time, you may need to rely on your reserves. And if you've set up your own business and it's really just you running it, you may need to put your own money into the business at certain times and perhaps take it out again later. So do your maths, work out a budget, work out not just what you need today, but in 2 years' time, 4 years' time, and ultimately when you retire, how much income do you need? It's an important subject, and for some, it will be the key point. For others of you, you may be thinking about setting up your own consultancy practice because you want a change of lifestyle, and that may be the most important driver. Certainly for me, when I left what was a very good and well-paid job 10 years ago, I didn't leave it because I wanted to earn more money. In fact, I took a fairly serious pay cut in the first couple of years. I did it because I wanted to get my life back under my control, to be my own boss. And I don't regret that for a moment. My time is my own, I can plan it, I can manage my own work, but I would just caution that you should be careful what you wish for. Let's have a look at that in a little bit more detail. Here we are, here's a little table. So I've put money and lifestyle as the two areas, and I've put some advantages and disadvantages for each. Let's look at the advantages. money? Well, you can earn what you want. The sky really is the limit if you've set up your own business, and you can decide how and when you pay it yourself. In terms of your lifestyle, your time is your own. You can choose your working hours. You can decide how many holidays you want. You can decide whether you want to be a high achiever or whether you just want to carry on with a moderate amount of work and just earn enough money to get by. Both of those are under your control. The disadvantages, however, are that when it comes to money, you can earn as much as you want, but you can also earn as little as your work will pay you. So every hour counts. When you're not working in your own business, you're not earning money. You won't have a pension, you won't have a car, you won't have a benefit package with holiday pay, sick pay, meals out, Christmas hamper, whatever your current employer may provide. Those won't be there. You've got to provide them yourself. And remember, you will be personally liable in many cases for your business decisions. The buck will stop with you. Now, some people will thrive on that challenge. Other people will find the pressure is too much for them. In terms of lifestyle, yes, your time is your own, but you may well be on your own. And for some people, that can be a pretty difficult place to be when you're working. Some people will burn out. They will not be able to say no to jobs. They will overwork. They will start to crumble under the pressure. And other people will thrive on it. So you need to think about your own characteristics, your own nature. Remember also, if you're working in your own consultancy practice, unless it's a big practice where you have lots of people working there, you're going to have to do everything, or you'll have a small team and you'll have to share the tasks out. So those unpopular tasks need to be done by you. And as the managing director of a small safety practice, I can tell you that some of my jobs include things like cleaning the loo, arguing with our telephone suppliers about their bill, and all the things I'd really rather not be doing, but someone's got to do them. You may be able to delegate those, and we'll come on to that later on as to how you share out the responsibilities for tasks. But fundamentally, you're going to have to do most of it yourself. People working in their own practices tend to be control freaks, which is good in some ways because you can manage everything to your standards. It's bad in others because it means that it's very hard to step back. And we'll come back onto this in a moment when we look at where you're going to be working from, this danger of your work spilling into your private life. So this is not for the faint-hearted. I can promise you, if you're the right sort of person and you've got the right business model, the rewards are enormous, but you must be fully aware of what you're getting into before you decide to go down this route. Still on your objectives, if you haven't left the webinar at this point deciding that you've had enough and this isn't for you, then let's think about the kind of work that you like doing. They always say that people tend to be best at things that they enjoy, and I think I would back that up, that if you enjoy the work, your enthusiasm is likely to be carried through with it. You won't mind some longer hours doing it. Your clients will see that you're enthusiastic, and you'll probably find it's easier and you're better at it. So try and be honest with yourself about the things that you enjoy doing, the things you're good at, and where your weaknesses are. If you find an area that you are good at and you enjoy it, the next question is there a demand for it in the marketplace? Will people want to use your services? And crucially, will they pay the right kind of rates? Assuming they will, who are your potential clients? Have you identified people who you think you can work for? Maybe you can sound them out in a subtle way to find out whether they would be willing to give you some work. And if they do give you some work, are you going to be able to deal with it? Can you expand? Can you service those requirements? It's all very well getting a nice big contract in, but if you can't actually deal with it comfortably, then it's going to go wrong. Your clients are going to end up taking it away from you again. Think about those things. I'm a big fan of brainstorming things, writing them down, making notes. And when I started out, I wrote a business plan. Everyone says you must have a business plan for your bank. We were lucky enough that we didn't have to go to the bank for funding, but I wrote a business plan anyway to focus my mind. Now, interestingly, when I looked at that plan 2 years later, what I was doing in my business was completely different to what was written in my business plan. But the business plan got me started, it got me thinking, it gave me direction. And The business evolved as time went on, but I had a starting point, which I'd thought through carefully. To illustrate this, I'm just going to tell you a quick story. When word got out that I was leaving my old employer, lots of people thought I was mad because I had a very good, well-paid job. Other people could understand why I was doing it. And one of my surveying contacts heard that I was going and very kindly rang me up one evening and said, James, I hear you're moving off to do your own thing in the field of health and safety. We're about to outsource a contract for our surveying company, which might suit you. It's going to be probably 3 days a week work. It's pretty straightforward work. You would find it very, very easy. It's going to be a range of commercial properties all the way along the south coast, which simply need premises safety inspections to make sure that there are no obvious hazards on the premises. It'll take you, as I've said, 3 days a week, and it's in your area along the south coast. You won't have to drive around the M25 every day, which is very good. And I thought, great, that would suit me perfectly. We talked about the kind of rates that might be applicable, and I thought, well, it's not really what I'd like to earn. It's about half the rate that I think I could probably charge for other work. But it's 3 days work in the bank. I only had probably a day and a half's work lined up at that time, so I was starting with pretty much a blank sheet of paper in terms of money. This looked like the answer. This will fill most of the rest of my week, give me half a day for admin. Perhaps I should take it. But then I sat down and thought it through a bit more carefully. And I thought, actually, this is taking up most of my week doing this work, earning half what I could work elsewhere at. And although that other work isn't available yet, I'm being taken off the streets for 3 days a week when I should be out there finding higher paid work, which is the stuff I really want to do. So effectively, I'm going to be boxing myself into this area of work, which is lower value. And do I want to do that? So I decided no. And I thanked my friend very much, but I declined the offer. And then when I put the phone down, I thought, perhaps I'm mad. That was a very good job I've just turned down. I don't have much other income. But in fact, within 6 months, I'd filled the order book with jobs that were paying twice as much. So it was the right decision. But unless you've thought this through carefully, what you want to do, what sort of rates you need to charge, where you'd like to be working, you're not going to be able to make that decision based on all the facts. Okay, I've got a question that's come in actually. I'm going to probably leave to the end, which is a question on qualifications for consultants, specifically using fire risk assessment skills. Let's pick that up when we come to the end, so I'll keep it open. If you've got any other points that arise as we go through, do type them into the Q&A box, and I may pick them up as we go along if they're relevant to that particular point. And one's just come in actually, I see. How do I set the fee, hourly rate, package rate? How do you find out the market rate? Very good questions. Let's tackle that now quickly as we have a moment. What I did was I added up a sort of spreadsheet of costs. So how much do I need to earn personally? That's one figure per annum. How much is it going to cost me to run my business? Accountancy fees, overheads, telephone bills, traveling around, stationery, IT consultants, all these things. I added them all up, insurance, all the overheads that we're going to look at a bit later. And I totted them all up to a total figure. Then I added on 20% profit on top of all of my income. And I said, right, that is the total amount of money that I need to earn in a year to make this business viable. I then worked out how many working hours there are available during the year. So 7.5 hours a day, 5 days a week is standard office hours, less 4 weeks of holiday. That gives me a total number of hours, and my maths isn't good enough to do that on the hoof, I'm afraid, but you can work it out. I then decided I'd need probably half a day a week of admin, which I couldn't charge people for, so I deducted that from the total. So my number of hours available to charge work to clients is shrinking as I do this calculation. I then ended up with a net number of hours available to actually do work and bill people. I simply divided my total costs, i.e. the total amount I need to earn, by the number of hours that are available net for me to do it. That gave me a rate per hour. That was my charge out rate, including a 20% markup for profit. So that gave me an idea. I could then compare that against the market rates to see whether people in my area were charging at about that kind of level. and they were. In fact, for some of my clients, which we'll come to later, that rate is quite cheap. Just quickly, we've got a moment. I did a quote for an insurance broker, rang me up and said, I've got a client, he needs some health and safety advice. They've got a big business. Can you give me a ballpark figure for how much you would charge in total for this job? So on the hoof, I thought of the number based on how long I thought it would take. I added a little bit in case there was a bit of extra complication I hadn't envisaged. And there was gave him the figure, there was a long pause, and I thought, my goodness, I've overcooked it. He's going to come back and say that's ridiculous. And he went, God, that's cheap, he said. And I thought I should have charged more, but we charge a fair price for our work and the clients are happy with it. And that is the crucial thing. We don't try and charge the maximum we can. We charge what is the right price. Okay, let's carry on. There's some other questions coming in, which I'll deal with as we go forward. So let's move on now to our third area, which is your business services. So we've thought about whether this is right for you and where you want to end up if you decide to set up your own consultancy. Now we're going to look at how this is going to work. Now, there's a lot in here, and I can't go into details, so I'm going to just pick a few things. You can download these slides later and think about this in a bit more detail in your own time. But let's start with what are the key attributes you need to run your own consultancy practice. And there are some bullet points, which you can see. I think I'd summarize them by saying you need to be an optimist. You need to be enthusiastic. You must bring energy to this job, that your clients will want to work with you if you bring something to the table in terms of enthusiasm and a positive attitude, a can-do approach, and professionalism. If you are by nature a slightly gloomy person, or you tend to sort of see the negatives in things, you need to work quite hard to try and present a positive approach to people, because that's why they want to bring you on board. For a head start, if you want to really hit the ground running, if you have previous consultancy experience, that will help you enormously, because this is about selling yourself as a consultant. No matter what sector you're working in, there are consultancy skills you will need. And you can learn those, but if you learn them already and you know them and you can apply them, that will help you to get ahead quickly. We've touched on this, but you need to identify what the market is for your, what I've called product. What are your services? What specialist area are you going to go into, or what general area are you going to go into? Make your market clear so that you know where you're aiming. Network, get your contacts up and use them effectively. If you have already got a reputation in your sector, and I hesitate to say, but a good reputation in your sector, then that will help you too. But make sure people know what you're doing, that you're the person to go to. Your trading structure, there are many places you can go to find this out. There's some good resources on the government business website about, which we'll come to later. I'll give you the web link. But as to how you set yourself up in trading structure, personally, I would suggest you find yourself a good accountant before you set up in business. Or if you're already trading and you're thinking of moving, talk to your accountant, because they are skilled in this area. They will be able to help you understand the advantages and disadvantages of each method of trading. But I do want to look a little bit more about the trading name. How are you going to present yourself in terms of your image? Now, for me, just to share my experience here, when I decided to set up my own practice, I sat down one night. I was working away actually on business, away from my home, had a night in a hotel, and I decided not to watch the Bake Off or anything else. Instead, I decided to think this through. So I sat down with a bit of paper and I brainstormed it and wrote down a whole list of possible names for my business. And then I went through them later and ruled various names out, depending firstly on whether, as I was setting up as a company, that company name was available at the company's house. If it wasn't, then that was straight off the list. Next, I looked at whether the domain name, so yourbusiness.co.uk or yourbusiness.com, and I looked for both, was available. And if it wasn't available, then it came off the list again. So I was left with a short list of names that ticked both of those boxes. And I then thought, how does this look to other people? So, for example, If you decide to set your business up and call it Norfolk Safety Consultants, that might be fine for now, but if you start to expand and pick up jobs in Suffolk, then maybe people in Suffolk are going to say, well, we better not use them because they're Norfolk Safety Consultants. So you've boxed yourself in into one geographical part of the country. Maybe you've decided to go with the name of a sector, so like Bridgland's Construction Safety Consultants. That might, again, say what you're doing at the moment, but if 2 years down the line you start to move into perhaps general help with facilities management safety, then you're saddled with a name that has construction in it, and people are going to say, well, we better not go to them because they're obviously construction experts. So think about whether geographically or business sector-wise you're limiting your market. Another one people do is they set up their name. I didn't call my company bridgelands.com because that's fine when it's just me, but if I decide I want to take on some able people and expand the business, and maybe one day they start to join the higher tier of management, they're always going to be working in a business that's got somebody else's name, and perhaps that's not the right thing to do. I might be limiting the potential there. So think it through. What's going to be a good business that says what you do, but actually maybe doesn't limit you? Work it out. There's this photograph I've got up made us laugh. I was driving with friends through France, and we passed this lorry on the motorway, and we had to take a photograph. I'm sure in French that's a pretty good word, but actually if you decide to go global and you're driving that across Britain, you know, we can move your stuff across the country. It's going to cause a few chuckles, so think it through. Okay, let's move now from your business infrastructure side of things. So we're moving from business services to how your business is actually going to function. You've decided which area you're going to work in, what you're going to call your business, what sector you're going to target. How are you going to make that happen physically? And I'm just going to have a quick look at the Q&As that are coming in here. About insurances, we'll pick that up in a moment. When did I realize it was the right time to employ people? I'll come back to that at the end, if I may. Terms and conditions, templates, again, I'll pick that up at the end as to how we can deal with that. So infrastructure. First thing is premises. You need somewhere to work from. Now, for many people, that will be their home. And for me, it was. For the first 3 years of my business, I worked in my spare bedroom. Now, that's fine, but again, think it through. How does that look to your clients? If you live in Fluffy Down Cottage, is that going to look good on your headed paper or in a business meeting? Yes, send the documents to me at Fluffy Down Cottage. Maybe if you live in 26 West Street, that's a much more anonymous kind of address, which could be a business or it could be a home. So if perhaps you think you want to portray a more serious business identity, which doesn't fit with the address you're in, you can have a PO box, for example. But remember, that in itself starts to look a bit anonymous and people might be suspicious of it. You could have a shared pay-as-you-go office space that includes an address, which some people do, and that's quite a cheap option. Maybe you could use that sometimes when you need it and work from home for most of the time. Or maybe you could team up with somebody and share some office space. Or maybe you end up, as we've done, in your own office where we've taken on our own dedicated premises in the town centre. Just explore each of those options. Talk to someone who you know who's perhaps done this and they can tell you about their experiences. Next is infrastructure. This is probably the second most important area after deciding where you're going to work. And I'd like you to think of this in terms of, if you are a consultant, then you are a knowledge worker. You are selling your knowledge by the hour. So the really important stuff for your business is actually in your head. Now, unless you are some sort of genius and can keep everything in your head and somehow back it up to somewhere else, then you're going to have to make sure that whatever is in your head is actually replicated somewhere in some IT system, so that you've got a library of information and resources that you can use to run your business. That is the lifeblood of your business, and you need to do it right. And the good news is that if you're setting up your own practice, or you're starting from a small beginning to a bigger practice, you've got a golden opportunity to set this up just how you want to do it. The most important message I can give you here is back it up. Make sure that you don't lose your data because of a virus on your system or a hardware failure. This is the lifeblood of your business. make sure that it's always going to be safe. People talk a lot about mobile working. I can tell you as a mobile worker around the country that it's not all it's cooked up to be. And yes, it's important to be able to access my data remotely, but there is really no substitute for working at a nice big desk with, we run dual monitor screens of 24-inch screens, 2 of them a piece for each workstation. You can get a lot done in that environment, much more than on a laptop working at a hot desk. But you need to be able to get into your data. Lots of people use a cloud-based system. We tried it. It didn't work for us as a business, and we've gone back to having a file server in our office with backup systems. So don't just believe the salesman. Talk to people who've done this and find out how it worked out for them, because what is good for one person may not be good for you. Okay, I'm going to just, there are a few questions coming in, which I will pick up as we go along and then tackle the rest at the end. Just on IT systems, one thing I would urge you to do is make sure you get a landline telephone. It presents a much more professional image than just having a mobile phone. To have a fixed landline, people will feel that you are a proper business with a proper address and a proper office that they can get in touch with, rather than simply working out of your car on a mobile phone. A lot of this is about presentation. The temptation is to try and do it all, and I've alluded to this already. You may be able to do it all, but there's going to be a limit to the number of hours in your day, and eventually you are going to find your day is full, and unless you want to close your book of business and not do any more work apart from what you've already got, that's going to be it for you. Instead, I'd suggest you should outsource the stuff that can be done better and probably cheaper by other people, and stick to what you're good at. So for us, we outsource our accountancy work, we outsource our IT systems, and we outsource some of our professional work, which I'll come to a bit later on. But don't kid yourself. You know, you may be a genius, but actually there are going to be some things you're better at than others. So be honest with yourself and think, who could do this better than me? On the professional side, we do now outsource some of our professional work. So here's a picture of my colleague Jeff, who worked with us for a couple of years before he retired. There he is doing a noise survey. We're assessing the noise from plant and equipment in a quarry. We did that for a couple of years, and actually, because we only did it every couple of years, really just for this client, we decided this was something that could be done quicker and more effectively by an occupational hygienist who we know. So we now outsource that work to the occupational hygienist. The client is delighted because they get frankly, a much better job done at pretty much the same price. And it frees us up. It takes us twice as long as these people to do the job. That means we've got twice as much time to do something that we're better at. Watch out for liabilities. If you do subcontract to people, you need to think how you do it. If they're doing the work for you and you're presenting it as your own work, you're going to be liable in terms of being sued if anything goes wrong with it. Alternative to that is to say to the client, here are a couple of people who can do this for you. Go directly to them. You lose control of the job, but you don't get the liabilities in quite the same way. Just have a think about your business infrastructure. And one of the questions that's come in is, what kind of insurances do we need? What are the insurances required? Well, here it is. If you're working with your own practice, just you will need to have professional indemnity insurance, crucially. So that means that if you make a mistake professionally and your client loses money and wants to come to you to get their money back, your insurance policy will cover it, provided it's the right policy. There are lots of suppliers of this, so you need to think carefully what kind of insurance you need and crucially what level of cover you require. Whether it's $250,000, $500,000 or £1 million of cover will depend on the kind of work you're doing. You should also have insurance for your business equipment and your premises if you're working in your own office. If you're running a business, you will need to have public liability insurance, which means that if somebody gets injured while you're on site, for example, then your insurers will cover that. And if you have employees working for you, you will also need employers' liability insurance. So there's a number of different types of insurance you require, depending on what kind of business you're running. You've got a golden opportunity, as I've mentioned, of setting this up right. If you're setting up your own consultancy, this is the time when you can say all those systems that I hated in my old job, the forms we had to fill in, the awful computer programs that didn't work properly, well, now you have only yourself to blame. So get it right to begin with, and you will reap the rewards further down the line. Good management is about having good systems. So set them up, and it will save you time and hassle later on. So things like standard forms for instructing, for receiving instructions, standard terms of business that's come up, and it's on the list here. And someone asked about this earlier. Where do you get that from? Personally, I actually deal with a lot of different professionals: solicitors, accountants, surveyors, architects. So I collected all of the various terms of business that they've sent to me over the years when they've been quoting for jobs, and I took all the bits that I liked, put them all together into my own version, and produced my own version of terms of business. Did I run it past my solicitor? No, I didn't, because in my previous job, I used to work quite closely with solicitors over this sort of thing, so I knew enough about it. But actually, if you're not familiar with this area, it may be worth running it past certainly your accountant if they're on board, and possibly with your solicitor. It'll cost you a bit, but that will be money well spent. But don't let it become too complicated. Don't ask your insurers, because they will make it a 30-page document. Ours is 2 pages, front and back. That's all it is. Okay, let's move on to our next slide. There's a list of things you can think about. You can think about them in your own time. Financial matters. I just want to talk about this for a little bit, because I mentioned at the beginning, money is one of the 2 most important things that you will have to decide on. And you need to understand how your business finances are going to work. Find a good accountant, talk to them, and run through these things with them. And they will be able to guide you on this. But crucially, you will have to be in charge of your own cash flow. And one of the key messages I want to just share with you here is that you will have to pay tax, unfortunately. As Mark Twain famously said, there are 2 things that are certain in life: death and taxes. So you are going to have to pay tax, and it will come as a nasty shock when it's due at the end of the tax year, which generally is payable in January, before the end of January, if you're a company, or I think if you're a private individual, again, your tax is due at the end of January. So we actually set aside a chunk of money each month into a separate bank account that we don't touch, which is to pay the tax bill at the end of the year. So it doesn't come as a nasty surprise when we get there. So we monitor our cash flow as we go throughout the year. And I'm just going to show you a quick look at a spreadsheet that we use. We don't use a hugely complicated system because we're not a hugely complicated business. We use an Excel spreadsheet, and on it, we run it for our financial year. So this is a calendar year I've used. Actually, we run a year to the end of April each year. But on it, we list every job that we've got in the system. When we quote for a job, it goes into the potential column with the amount we've quoted. When it's been confirmed by the client, we put it into the confirmed column, which you can see at the beginning. And when the job has been billed, we move it from the confirmed column into the billed column. We also add on to the actual quote for the time the expenses that we've recovered. We keep that separate because, remember, the expenses are things you've already paid out, so you're simply getting the money back in again. That's not extra money you're earning, it's simply recovering your costs. So keep it separate from your time charges. We also put the invoice number so we can track what the bill was, and we put the month it was billed. Our spreadsheet actually has a column for all 12 months of the year, so we can see a total amount billed for every month, so we can have a running total of how we're going. We like to try and bill 1/12 of our income every month we can to keep the cash flow going, and this helps us manage it. So there's a simple tool you can use to set up your cash flow, manage it, and monitor it. The other thing I just want to mention on this is it's all very well billing it, but of course, until your clients have paid and it's in your bank, it's not going to do you much good. So keep an eye on your debtors, make sure that you are on top of that and the people are going to pay you promptly. And the one tip I can give you there is for every job we do, we set out exactly what we're going to do, what it's going to cost, and when we're going to send the bill and the job documents, the reports, whatever they may be. So, and we send terms of business with it. So the client knows exactly what's going to happen. When the job is finished, it's then very easy to say, here we are, the job is done as agreed, here's our bill on the agreed basis. And normally it'll go through within a couple of weeks. You get the odd few you have to chase, but it's much easier to chase them if everyone knows that it's agreed. Okay, you with me so far? It's a bit of a gallop through, as I warned you it would be. I'm just going to now wrap up this with a quick section on achieving your goals. So we've looked at whether this is right for you. We've looked at how to set your objectives, to think about where you're heading. We've looked at how to set up your business services. We looked at how to set up your business structure. The question now is, once you're up and running, how are you going to achieve your goals? And these are really just some general principles for you to think about. First of all, stick to what you know. I've mentioned this already, but you're going to succeed if you are working in an area that you are knowledgeable and familiar with. You're less likely to be sued for getting it wrong. You're going to enjoy the work more. That will help you to become the expert. You want to become the go-to person in your sector that people will say, ring James Bridgland, he's the guy to talk to. That is, when your reputation is that, you will get lots of work coming in. And part of that is being helpful to people. When people ring up and ask us questions, which are outside our business sector or area of work, we don't simply say no. We try and say, no, but why don't you try these people? Or we give them some sort of steer. Go to this website. Here's a register of people who might be able to help you. People remember that they were helpful. We'll come back to them next time. They'll pass your name on to somebody else. One day, you will get a really good job from somebody who you were helpful to in the past. And don't be afraid to refer work to people. You may think they're your competitors in this consultancy world, but actually there's enough work to go around. If you're the expert in your area, and there are areas that perhaps you're not quite so expert in, refer that work to somebody else. You will get it back, I promise you. You'll get work referred back to you by others. And all our best jobs are referrals from satisfied clients. They tell their neighbors, they tell their friends, they tell their business colleagues, and we get more work on the back of it. 3 top tips just to finish off with here before we start to look at some questions. People by people. The relationships are so important. When I was with my last employer, which was a big organization, the clients would often make the connection that actually the business that I was working for was only as good as the person the client was dealing with. Yes, you've got all that backup behind you, but the client is dealing with you, and that is where the relationship is vital. That's why when people move to different businesses, quite often their clients will follow them because they want to deal with that person. People have long memories. They will remember you if you're helpful. They will remember you if you're reliable, you're honest, and your word is your bond, that you do what you say you're going to do and you tell it straight. People remember that and they will come back to you. And thirdly, this is something I have to keep under constant review: under promise and over deliver. Under promise and over deliver. If you promise the earth to a client and then don't deliver it, they're always going to be disappointed. Whereas if you give them, say, a 3-week lead-in time for doing a job and you send it in 2 and it's better than they thought it was going to be, they're going to be delighted. Remember, your clients aren't going to thank you for doing a good job. They've paid you well for doing a good job. They're only going to thank you if you do a brilliant job for them. That's where you want to be heading. That's where you're going to get referrals. Further information, I've mentioned there are all sorts of resources that you can go to for further help. IOSH, of course, has a load of resources for you as a health and safety practitioner and as a consultant. Do use your branch network to talk to people, to gain experience, to share experiences with them, and to find out more about what's happening in your area. The consultancy group can give you a steer. We have a microsite which has information on it, which you will find helpful. And IOSH has all sorts of resources centrally that you can tap into. You can look at other professional bodies, like the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development has some good resources that you can use, particularly on employment. And the government, amazingly, has some useful things, particularly around the area of writing a marketing plan, starting up a business, writing a business plan, getting you thinking about these areas. The consultancy group, just to tell you a little bit about us, we are consultants either working for other businesses or self-employed. And our group allows us to network with each other, to share experiences, to share resources, and to put on events such as this and one-to-one events with people in the audience around the country. There is an IOSH guide on consultancy, which is useful. So if you haven't seen that, download it and have a look at it. And remember, not all of our consultants will necessarily be doing this full time. Some will be doing it as part of their wider job. That's it in terms of the slides. We've left a little bit of time. We've got 10 minutes now left for questions and answers. And there are a few that have come in, which I'm just going to tackle now quickly before we open it up more widely to questions and answers. And just picking them off, someone's asked me about advice on company logo and website hosting. That is a tricky one because there are so many people out there competing in this marketplace. I would suggest you go to people who've got a website and a logo that you like the look of and ask them who they used to help them with it. When it comes to a logo, I think you want to try and have your own ideas that you can then get somebody else to interpret for you and present. But web design and website hosting, there are loads of people who do it, and you need to start with one you like the look of and perhaps look at using that same company. Prices will vary enormously, I can tell you from experience, and it does depend on what you want to do with your website. Ours is really just a shop window that our clients don't really use much. Others will use it on a very much more interactive basis. So find the person who's right for what you want to achieve. Talk to other people. Someone's asked about PI insurance, that they have to have a high level of cover. Have we had similar requirements? Can you get it reduced? PI insurance, professional indemnity insurance, this is expensive, and I think my advice there would be if you're asked for a particularly high level of cover for a particular job, talk to your insurance broker and see whether you can get that put in place specifically for that job, specifically for that client, which will reduce the insurer's exposure and may well reduce your premium. You may find you simply turn down a job where the PI cover is going to be too high. You know, we've looked at jobs where they want 20 million of cover, and we've simply said, no, you know, we're a small business, this isn't our area. So don't be afraid to turn things down, but if it is a good job, talk to your brokers. There's usually more than one way around the problem. Someone's been working with a business coach to understand how best to market their business. Do I have any tips? I do. I think the best way of marketing your business is through your own reputation. And so you need to get out there, network your contacts, and let people know what it is you're doing. And you need to be able to demonstrate that you are the best person to do that kind of work. And once you start to get some work, that will be your spokesman in the marketplace. Jobs you've already done are the things that speak loudest. When did I realize it was time to employ people? The answer to this is far too late. I put off employing somebody for probably about 2 years beyond when I should have done. And the answer is when you find that you're working weekends and evenings and your family tell you that you're grumpy, it's time to employ someone. You've either got to, what we did initially, actually, we outsourced work to Jeff, who I mentioned earlier, who was kind of semi-retired. We paid him on a kind of piecework basis for his work. And that worked well, but again, we outgrew that. We decided it was time to take somebody on. It's a big step and brings its own challenges with it, but when it's right, you will know because you need help. Let's have a look. What else have we got? Someone has asked me about how to win new business. Well, I think we've covered this actually to some extent in terms of networking, in that you need to establish a reputation in your area. Now, if you don't have a big base of existing contacts you can draw upon, you may need to look at mail shotting people, but just be aware of the cold calling rules there. There are rules about contacting people sort of unannounced. Maybe you need to try and get alongside other people in your work sector. So we get a lot of work from property managing agents. So we talk to them a lot because they're the people who get us in to help their clients, the property owners. We don't talk a huge amount to solicitors because they tend to think they know it all anyway and don't need our help, but occasionally we do. We certainly talk to people like architects. There's a bit of a liaison between construction work and health and safety that occasionally they can help us with. But our main source is managing agents. So find the people who work in your sector who need to know what you do and how you can do it. Try and get a job from them, do it well, and then you will have established that you have a track record in this area. Finally, there was a question quickly about using qualified health and safety consultants conducting fire risk assessments using just health and safety knowledge, but not specialist fire risk assessment training. Beware, I mentioned earlier, stick to what you know. We don't like to operate outside our knowledge sphere because, first of all, you're probably not going to be able to do the job as well as a specialist, and your client won't be happy with the result. It'll take you twice as long, you won't make any money on the job, and the client will not think it's been done particularly well, and your reputation will suffer. So the answer to that is, if you're looking at fire risk assessment and you don't know much about it, don't do it initially, but get yourself trained up. Our office sent our guys on a 5-day intensive fire risk assessment training course, which was enormously helpful, and we are now doing some fairly basic fire risk assessment work for clients while we build up our experience. And my colleague is actually applying to the IFE register and has to submit completed fire risk assessments and undergo further training to consolidate his experience to see if he can become a professional fire risk assessor. Okay, those are all the questions that have come in so far. There may be some others, so I'm going to hand back to Ben just to see if he wants to kind of steer this Q&A section here.
That's fine. Well, there don't appear to be any other questions that have come in at the moment. In fact, one has come in, I think. Can you please explore further ways to cost jobs? How does retaining cost work?
Okay, good question. Well, when I cost a job, what I do is I've explained my philosophy for working out my charge out rate. So work out your rate per hour that you need to charge to do the job profitably, and don't undersell yourself. You know, this is a downward spiral. If you start to think I'll quote a much cheaper price to get the job, then all of the other people in the health and safety consultancy sector are now going to be competing against your lower prices, and we're all going to go down and down and down in price until nobody can make any money. So stick to your guns. If you need to earn that money per hour to make your business a success, to go on holiday and to have a retirement one day, stick to that rate and do the job well so the client still thinks it's good value. Anyway, back to the question of costing jobs. What I do is I have, again, a little Excel spreadsheet that I got set up as a template as part of my business management system, and I work out what does this job involve. So I type in a load of lines into the spreadsheet that say time to confirm instructions, say quarter of an hour in the time column, travel to the job, and I usually only charge for one way's travel, otherwise it gets a bit expensive. So I'll put the 1 hour or whatever it is for travel in the column of time. Then I think 4 hours on site meeting people, and I work out who I've got to meet, how long with each, and I tot up the time and I put it in the column under everything else. Then I get back to the office, I've got to research the subject, that's going to be a couple of hours, put a couple of hours in the column. Then I've got to write the report, how many hours that'll take, put that in the column. Then I've got to collate it all, print it, write a letter, send it out with the invoice. How much time is that going to take? Put that in the column, add all the hours up. The Excel spreadsheet multiplies it automatically by my charge out rate. That gives a total figure for the cost of my time. I then look at that and say, does that feel about right? If I go back to the client with that price, are they going to laugh at me? Are they going to say, God, that's cheap? Or is that about what the market is going to bear? And if the answer is, that feels right, I think I'm going to get that job, I quote it. I always add on out-of-pocket expenses on top, because they are extra costs that are going to cost me. So that's not income to me, that's simply reimbursement. So mileage I charge 50p a mile, which is 5p more than the rate that the employees get paid. They get paid 45p, but the company charges 50 as basically a margin for all the admin of working out the mileage and expenses returns. I add on any extra costs like an accident book or a health and safety law poster. And so the fee is X pounds plus out-of-pocket expenses, which I'll tell the client I'll itemize if they want, plus VAT. And that's the quote. and importantly, it's subject to my terms of business, which I enclose. Okay, I hope that's answered that one. We've got a couple more questions, I think. Do I use email to send reports? Yes, I do. But again, it depends on the client. So some of my clients are very old school and they don't really believe in all this modern computer nonsense. They want a nice file full of paper they can put on their desk and their people can refer to it. So they will get a paper hard copy file in the post. But I generally send them an email version as well. I send the documents electronically. And some consultants will PDF everything so the client can't actually kind of update it or change it or work with it. Personally, my view is the client's paid for this information, they've paid for this advice. I send them Word versions of my health and safety policies and documents because it's then theirs. They can update it if they want to, but if I've done a good job, I know they'll come back to me and say, can you please come and help us do some more? I'm not too protective of all of this. I do copyright it so they don't go and sort of flog it to somebody else to use, but don't be afraid. If you're going to do a good job and work with your clients, don't be afraid to give them stuff that they can use and perhaps update themselves if they want to. Question, do I visit potential clients before they commit to using me? If you don't decide to use, do you charge for that time and traveling expense? Very good question. I generally try and avoid visiting clients before I quote them for the job. And the reason for that is because a lot of my clients are 2 or 3 hours drive away from my office. So it's most of a day out of the office just to go and see them. If it's a job that I think I know pretty much what it's going to involve, and I will discuss it at length with the client over the phone so that I can get a good idea before I provide my quote, then I will simply quote them by email. If I'm not quite sure what they need, or if it's a really nice sounding job that I really, really want and I want to definitely get it, I will go and see them, because that is your opportunity to see the whites of their eyes, to get in front of them and to actually sell your services, sell yourself to them. And so I may go and see them, but I'll try and tie it in with a visit that I'm making in the area so I don't have to make a separate trip. But I would say on balance, probably only 10% of my jobs are things where I've gone to visit the client and then quoted. 90% I will discuss it over the phone, maybe ring them back, get a few more questions answered, work out the time I need, and then I'll quote them. And I always leave myself a get out. I always say, I hope this looks okay. If you are looking for something on a different basis, please let me know and we can discuss. Which means if they don't like to look at my price, or they think I got the wrong end of the stick in terms of what I'm doing, I've got a chance to recast it and requote before they simply park it and go to somebody else. Okay, I'm conscious we've passed the hour mark, so some of you may need to disappear. I don't know if there are any other questions or not, but I'm going to hand back to Ben just to close that out and maybe wrap this up.
Okay, well, thank you very much. There aren't any further questions, actually, so we've managed to tackle them all in good time, which is great. Just to briefly go back to what James mentioned with regards to the IOSH Consultancy Group and their resources online, it might also be worth pointing out for some of you that the group have just announced a new event that they're going to be running in Manchester on the 13th of December, which is all about adding value to your consultancy. So that may also be of interest to some of you, in which case if you head onto the IOSH website and search for the event under the date for the 13th of December, you'll be able to see the details for that. Other than that, though, obviously, thank you very much, James, for taking the time out to speak today. We're getting some really good comment from people, so hopefully everyone has found this very useful. James did mention earlier the session has been recorded and his presentation has been PDF. So these will be added to the consultancy group microsite probably later this afternoon. But I'll also be emailing you a copy of everything later on this afternoon as well, so you'll have it. Other than that, all I can really say is, again, thank you, James, and I'm going to close the session in the next sort of 20 seconds or so. So if you do have any last-minute comments, please post them now. Otherwise, you will shortly be kicked out of the room once I close the session. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for attending, and I do hope you found it was helpful. Thank you.